These are some of the trippiest episodes in Family Guy. Kicking things off with one of the most unique episodes as we go behind the scenes of the show in Inside Family Guy. The curtains peeled back as we see what being on set for an episode of Family Guy is really like, hosted by notorious villain James Woods.
For the first time ever, you'll see what a typical production week is like for TV's 11th favorite family.
Sitting down with the actors, we get to learn about the ins and outs of the show. I guess it isn't too surprising to learn that a lot of the cast are just like their on-screen characters.
Being on the show reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Macbeth.
What's the quote?
Whoa!
We even get to hear some interesting behind-the-scenes trivia, like how the show was originally supposed to be about Chris being a doctor until Peter stole his thunder.
I've got some bad news.
Well, it can't be any worse than what's in here.
That's why he's the Family Guy. But the real magic happens in the writer's room, where the talented team works non-stop with the stars to craft the best stories possible.
Would it kill us to just once tell a joke that brings glory to God?
I guess not everybody is like their on-screen character. According to many of the people who work on the show, Peter has become quite the nightmare to work with over the years. His antics include harassing the writers and refusing to rehearse with the other actors, but rumor has it that he may not be around for much longer.
Word around the stage is they've decided to finally fire Peter and replace him with another actor.
At the table read for the next episode, Peter learns that his character is being killed off, and not in the most delicate of ways.
He was shot in the head while killing himself. I suppose he had his demons and his enemies.
Peter thinks this will be a simple time machine fix or just a dream by the end, but nope, he's dead, and they're serious about not bringing him back. Instead, they replace him with David Spade in a new role.
Hi, everybody.
Uncle Ricky!
Furious, Peter walks out and sets off on his own journey with his dignity still intact.
Have a good life, Mr. G. Your penis is out.
Scratch that last part. During rehearsals for the next episode, it's clear that David Spade is going to leave his mark on the show. Skid mark, that is.
What are all these doing in our house?
Each other?
Meanwhile, after leaving home, staying in a fancy hotel, and having no career prospects whatsoever, Peter is evicted from his room and is forced to move into a rundown city apartment.
Everything comes to an end eventually, and you just gotta keep moving forward.
I'll remember that when I see him in the In Memoriam section of the next Oscars. Tape night for the first episode without Peter finally rolls around, with some of the cast noting the weird feeling of him not being here. Meanwhile, David Spade is just not doing it for anyone, just like in real life.
What's for dinner?
Okay, we can trim that in editing.
Elsewhere, Peter's trying to make ends meet by charging for photos while he's dressed as an old comic character, but once he sees Spade's face plastered with his family, he decides he's had enough.
Screw this! I am taking back my TV show and my family.
Peter crashes the shoot and apologizes for the way he acted to his co-stars and the show's crew, begging for them to take him back so he can show them how much they mean to him. The family accepts him with open arms, but it turns out this whole ordeal is done every week. He gets fired, he comes crawling back, then forgets by the next week. And that is a typical week of making Family Guy. What a headache. But if you're looking for something atypical, look no further than when Peter took us on a journey through the history of rock and roll in Rock Hard. Peter and the guys are at the record store admiring the rich history rock and roll has. Unsatisfied with how formulaic biopics cover the highs and lows of music's greatest artists, Peter decides to tell his own versions of the stories, starting with Jim Morrison and the Doors. Back in the 60s, an idea was formed on a beach by Ray Manzarek and Jim Morrison. The guys got a few more floppy-haired fellas to join, and just like that, they got themselves a band.
Nothing's gonna get between us. Not drugs or alcohol or the first toxic relationship that comes my way.
Pay no mind to the toxic relationship walking by right now.
Screw you guys! I'm following that lady and there's nothing you can do about it!
Wow, a band formed and broke up all in under a minute. Music is wild. Jim decides to visit that red-haired hippie who reveals that she's in a long-term relationship with an astronaut. Out of this world, dude. Look, that would have been very funny in the 60s.
Unfortunately for you, this is the one time in history where astronauts are cooler than rock stars.
But that doesn't hold much weight because the pair end up sleeping together anyway. Morrison and the Doors see a bit of success early on, though Morrison's stage fright drives him to drink the hard stuff to calm his nerves.
Strawberry Nesquik. It upset his stomach terribly because of his lactose intolerance.
Unfortunately for him, the 60s were a time of fart-trapping leather pants, but it appears his shaking and gyrating to get it out is just what the people are looking for. Later on, Jim is introduced to a big music agent by his muse, and if you've seen a music biopic before, you know this is where things get really good right before they get really bad.
I'd love your autograph on the bottom of this contract in absence of any legal counsel.
Eventually, fame becomes too much for Jim as he loses all credibility while trying to whip it out during a concert. So he does what any self-respecting musician would do, he moves to Paris and drowns in a bathtub. Consider this door closed. Too soon? Peter's takeaway from this story is that white guys invented rock and roll, but Jerome is nearby to educate them on rock's true roots.
I'ma educate y'all on the greatest rocker of all time. Delta Blues man,
muddy drawers.
Muddy grew up in a poor neighborhood in the South with nothing to his name but a one-string guitar. Desperate to make it big, Muddy travels across the countryside to find the one person who could give him fame and fortune, the devil.
Sign here and you'll be the greatest guitar player who ever lived. All it'll cost you is your soul.
Sold! Who needs a soul anyway? Muddy Drawers ends up becoming a big hit, touring throughout the South with his gross, crawdad-loving driver, Vinny. Muddy and Vinny form a tight friendship, with Muddy even helping him write letters to Vinny's wife.
I can't wait to get home and back that big fat ass up.
So romantic. But this friendship doesn't last long, as Muddy one day finds all of his songs missing, but does find a letter from Vinny.
I stole all your songs, and my real name is Elvis Presley.
That son of a bitch!
Oh, Elvis, you hound dog, you. With one last story to go, Stewie details the life and career of rock star Elton John. Elton starts off as a boring accountant until his flamboyant dad tries to beat some pizzazz into him.
No son of mine is gonna be a heterosexual paper pusher.
Elton decides to collaborate with songwriter Bernie Taupin, and the two form a solid partnership that Elton immediately misreads.
Whoa, I'm not gay. You're not? You just seem very...
Yeah, I'm British.
Common misunderstanding. From there, Elton signs with a high-profile producer who pushes him day and night to make music, eventually leading to an impressive number of hit records. Elton ends up getting heavily into the party lifestyle of a rock star and even has a falling out with Bernie.
Elton, if you leave me right now, it's a big deal. Because this is the time of the story where that's a big deal.
And like all rock stars, Elton parties too hard and ends up in the hospital, but he actually lives to perform another day, even if he doesn't like who he turns out to be.
That's what I look like?
But if you want to see what Family Guy would look like if it was set in different decades, then look no further than the episode Through the Years, which explores the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Peter kicks things off at the Museum of Television and Radio to celebrate Family Guy being the longest running show ever. I actually don't think that's true, but I'm too lazy to check.
Family Guy has survived 19 cancellations, 2 assassination attempts, and a pretty good ribbon by those South Park guys.
Peter decides to showcase some of the show's best episodes of its first few decades, starting with an episode from all the way back in 1959. And no, I wasn't alive back then, but my jokes were. Things looked quite different back then. Everything was black and white, the fashion was loud, kids were smoking cigarettes. Ah, the golden years.
We don't trust just any cigarette for our children. Raleigh Kids is the only cigarette made for tiny hands.
The radio announces that a hot new invention called the television will be hitting the markets. Elvis Presley is scheduled to give a performance that the world can watch, but the Griffins only have the radio. Since they don't have a ton of money, Brian suggests buying a TV and then returning it the next day. Infinite money hack! With their new 10-inch screen, the Griffins invite their neighbors over to watch the big show. Before it begins, they catch a haunting report on women in the workplace, spotting Lois working on the factory line.
If God wanted women in the workplace, he'd have made them alcoholics. You're quitting that job tomorrow.
But Peter quickly changes his tune when he realizes how much he loves the TV, so they'll need a second job to afford it. But as Peter gets addicted to watching television and Lois gets exhausted from working at the factory, they decide to give it up so Lois can come home. Yet Lois has a surprise for Peter. She built a TV for him at the factory on her last day. Good thing she quit her day job though, because I don't think TV should explode like that.
I guess this is why women shouldn't work.
It was a different time. The next episode takes place in the Technicolor world of the 60s, where Chris wants to attend the notable hippie music festival Woodstock. Peter forbids it, but that won't stop a teen looking to smoke a doobie.
Mom, Dad, Chris is gone. He went to Woodstock.
Worried something might happen to him, Peter hops in his very, very, very long car and heads off to the festival. Peter finds Chris and demands he come home, but Chris just wants to dance shirtless and smoke as much pot as he can.
No son of mine is gonna be smoking.
Why not, Dad? Is it any worse than your 3-martini lunch?
Again, it was a different time. Peter explains that he just wants Chris to stay a kid a little bit longer, and drugs can ruin your early life. It's a good thing he got here before Chris took anything too hard though, right?
You're tripping right now, aren't you?
Widow!
He'll be fine. Everybody was tripping in the 60s. The final episode takes place in the 70s, where Peter tries to get Chris to enlist in the Vietnam War, despite Brian's objections to the conflict. To show how important the war effort is, they go to visit Quagmire, who's just returning from his deployment.
Good to see you back safely, Glenn.
Murderer! Hey, show some respect!
Sorry.
While readjusting Quagmire to American life, Peter asks if he has any stories he can tell Chris before he gets shipped out. But Quagmire has seen and heard horrors you people can only imagine, like constantly having to listen to that Fortunate Son song that's in every war movie ever.
You weren't there. You don't know. I'll kill you! I'll kill you! You didn't hear the songs I heard!
Peter realizes the horrors that await Chris and plans to try to get him out of it any way he can, which essentially involves taking his place in boot camp, but judging by his reluctance to go himself, it's clear he didn't think this one through. Unfortunately, he doesn't make it home with his tombstone telling the whole story. Seriously, it really was a different time. But rather than looking back, let's look to the future in Rich Old Stewie, which showed us what happened when an elderly Stewie reunited with his family when Peter was dying. Many years into the future, an intimidatingly dark mansion sits atop a hill, owned by an elderly Stewie who is about to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. Having been made rich thanks to his invention of the weightless dump, Stewie's being honored as Man of the Year for saving the rainforest, but his acceptance speech is unexpectedly cut short.
I'm now going to stop mid-sentence because I see someone from my... Brian?
The two friends catch up after almost 50 years apart, with Brian living much longer thanks to a pill Stewie invented. Brian doesn't understand why he did that if he was just going to leave home, but Stewie explains that he couldn't stay with the family any longer and had to strike out on his own.
I guess I'm just not a family guy.
Hilarious. But what isn't hilarious is the news Brian comes bearing.
You have to come back. Stewie, Peter is dying.
On the way back to Quahog, they go to pick up Chris, who now lives in a rundown shack after wasting 50 years of his life.
Except I obsessed over teaching my how to talk.
What?
Who's out there?
50 years well spent, if you ask me. Next on the list is Meg, who runs a small security business out in the desert, which pretty much just means she tests out bulletproof vests. The group finally makes it to their old home to find the entirety of Spooner Street run down and unkempt, and Peter isn't in much better shape either.
Your father's had severe diabetes ever since they opened 3 ice cream stores in town.
They're all good.
Stewie feels guilty about leaving home and letting it become run down, promising Peter to help their family once he passes. With the help of Stewie's company, the house is restored to its former glory. Peter's made as comfortable as he can, but he still has one request: to dance to a slow version of Surfin' Bird one last time.
Family, help me dance.
Didn't think that song could get more grating, but there you go. But the time has finally come for Peter to pass on, struggling to stay awake for as long as he can so he can manage his final words.
Lactating, pregnant, Latinas.
Words to live by. And with that, Peter dies, surrounded by a tearful but loving family. With the deed done, Stewie intends to leave so he can have his money sent to the family so they'll never have to worry again, leaving fancy cigars behind for each of them. As he departs, the family cries once again, but only for a few seconds. It turns out this is all a ploy to get Stewie's money, but Stewie knew that and turned up the gas in the house right before he left.
Chris should be lighting his cigar right about...
But this is all just a very deep daydream Stewie had while looking at a Halloween costume.
What the hell is wrong with you? You've been staring at that old man Halloween costume for 30 minutes.
I get it. Sometimes you gotta contemplate your entire life before you pick out a Halloween costume. But the next thing you'll be contemplating is who killed Meg in a hard-boiled detective caper, The Fat Man Always Rings Twice. In black and white Depression-era Quahog, we're introduced to Peter as Mac, iMac Book Pro, private detective. Mac is approached by Hetty Tooth Grays, a woman whose daughter has gone missing, and Mr. Book Pro is the only man who can find her.
I wasn't sure I could trust her, but I needed the dough. My rent was $2 a month and I still owed 50 cents on my car.
The 20s truly were a simpler time. Mac takes the case, stopping by the church where the daughter worked to talk to the head priest.
Cardinal St. Louis, likely bad guy. Mac Book Pro.
Gotta say, loving these names as inaccurate to the times as they are. Peter doesn't find what he's looking for, so he decides to meet up with his journalist pal, Red Wiener. Maybe I don't love all the names.
Red was the best newspaper guy out there. Except when the newspaper was rolled up, then he was kind of scared.
Red lets him in on a little secret. The missing girl had contacted Red about a scoop, but when they planned to meet up at a speakeasy, she didn't show up. The duo decides to check the speakeasy out, questioning the bartender about the missing girl.
You ever seen her?
Doesn't ring a bell.
The barkeep does inform them of his distrust for the cardinal, who possibly rigged the votes when the city voted on prohibition. But it seems like Mac has gotten too nosy as he's cornered by a couple of thugs who politely ask him to forget the case.
Luckily, they let me go with a warning. My shadow wasn't so lucky.
Ready to step away, Mac is pulled back in when he gets a concerning call. The missing girl is dead. Dun dun dun! Mac and Hetty visit the coroner, and while it's not clear who killed her, they did find a roll of film in her waistband. But film takes a while to develop. It's not instant like today with you kids and your flip phones. When the photos do get developed, it reveals the Cardinal was working with the Italian mob.
Maybe they were in cahoots. Sister Megan discovered it, and that's why the Cardinal had her killed?
What's even more surprising is that there's a picture in there of the Cardinal and Hetty together. This is getting deeper than a really deep pool. I'm not good at clever comparisons. Mac goes to question one of the mobsters in the pictures, learning that the Cardinal is a bootlegger who rigged the votes on Prohibition so he could be the only one selling alcohol. With all the info he needs, Mac goes to confront the Cardinal at the church.
Funny I'd find you here in the church bathroom. This is the confessional.
He questions the Cardinal about the girl's death, but before he can get any answers out of him, the Cardinal is attacked by a knife in the back. Or somebody stabbed him, one of the two. Unfortunately, the police show up and catch Mac with a knife in hand and also reveal that ballistics indicate Sister Megan was killed with Mac's gun. Luckily, Red posts bail for Mac, and the two decide to team up to find out who's behind all this. Okay, this is a lot, but bear with me. Mac confronts Hetty at the dock, accusing her of working with the Cardinal to have Sister Megan killed, then killing the Cardinal to cover her tracks. She denies this and admits the Cardinal is her father, a secret she had to keep to protect his position. As Mac goes to haul her off, the real culprit is revealed to be Mac's assistant, who was an orphan at the church who killed Sister Megan as revenge for beating him. He then framed Mac as revenge for sabotaging his chances of becoming a ballerina when he broke his ankle on Mac's poop he left on the ground. Like I said, this is a lot. The assistant goes to kill both of them, but Mac still has a trick up his sleeve.
I got a friend at the harbor who owed me one.
With the culprit apprehended, Mac and Hetty passionately kiss, and that wraps up the legend of MacBook Pro. Again, great name. But that's not the only legend the Family Guy covers, as they covered 3 classic tall tales in Grim Job. Stewie's finding it hard to sleep one night, so Peter decides to read him a bedtime story from a book of fairy tales.
Jack and the Beanstalk. Now that title could be a fairy tale or a one. Let's find out.
For the sake of this channel, let's hope it's the former. We find Jack and his wife arguing over money since Jack doesn't have a job, with his wife suggesting they sell their one cow.
And be sure you get real money for it.
What else would I get?
I don't know, magic beans?
Well, that's something Jack didn't realize he needed until now. When Jack makes his way into town to sell his cow, he comes across a bridge troll refusing to let him pass, but it just so happens this troll is in the market for a cow.
I don't have much, but I'll give you some magic beans for it.
The things he was told not to get? He'll take it. Jack's wife is obviously furious, tossing the beans out the window and demanding Jack go find a job. But it turns out those beans were magic, and by morning, they've sprouted a beanstalk that pierces the clouds. Filled with a sense of adventure, Jack climbs all the way up to discover a large castle in the sky with a golden goose.
Are you taking a goose poop?
I'm not defecating, you nitwit. I'm laying an egg.
And not just any egg, a golden egg. Finding his fortune, Jack goes to take the goose, but is stopped by the bird's owner, a very angry giant. The giant chases him down the beanstalk, but Jack manages to reach the bottom just before the stalk is severed by an angry neighbor, leading the giant to fall to his death.
Jack 6, giant 0.
What? Why is that 6 points?
Well, it'll be 7 if he can make the field goal. Keep up, Goose. The next story follows a young girl named Little Red Riding Hood who is about to embark on a trip to Grandma's house as her mother warns her to stay on the path the whole way and she'll be fine.
Grandma lives 68 miles away, right? You're sending your child out there to die.
Before she can make it there, a wolf visits her grandmother and pretends to be her.
It's your granddaughter, Red.
How do I know it's you?
Oh, come on, that's a perfect imitation.
By the time Red gets there, she finds the wolf in her grandma's bed and clothes. But Red isn't falling for that old trick. She's pretty sure her grandmother's a human. Before the wolf can hurt Red, a heroic, or possibly psychotic, woodsman bursts in and chainsaws the wolf in half very slowly. I guess the moral of this story is, chainsaws are cool? Aw, the stories put Stewie to sleep.
Hey, wake up! We got one more!
Well, our last story is Cinderella, which sees a young girl being forced to do labor around the house while her sisters are treated like royalty. While Cinderella toils away, the other girls are invited to a party for the prince.
I hear he's looking for someone to spend the rest of his life with.
Well, it won't be you.
But she won't let that stop her as Cinderella makes her own dress just in time for the ball, but her mother tells her she won't be going and has the sisters tear apart her dress. Not to be dramatic, but I hope they die by the end. Not all hope is lost though, as Cinderella is visited by a fairy godmother who's looking to lend a hand by gifting her a new dress, a beautiful horse, and a carriage to take to the ball.
Is everything all right in here? This hurts! This hurts!
Cinderella manages to bump into the prince at the party, who becomes quite smitten with her. They share a lovely dance, but just as they're about to kiss, the clock strikes midnight and the magic begins to wear off. So Cinderella flees from the party, leaving behind a single shoe.
Wait, you forgot your glass slipper!
So all her clothes disappear, but the one slipper stays? They really need to make user agreements for magic. Desperate to find his love, the prince searches all over the kingdom for the owner of the glass slipper before eventually arriving at Cinderella's home. Recognizing her from the night before, the two get married after having shared a total of 5 minutes with each other. I hope to find a fairy tale love like that one day. But while they can find luck in love, they can't quite find it during awards season, which led to Peter changing the entire format of the show to win an Emmy in Emmy-winning episode. After being on the air since 1999, Peter is tired of having never won an Emmy. Well, they've actually won 9, but never the big one, Best Animated Show. Peter decides to clean up the show's act, making this their Emmy-winning episode.
So get all your pukes and farts out now.
Yeah, that made me want to watch more. They decide to take a page out of Modern Family's book, and by that I mean Peter replaces Lois with Sofia Vergara. So what's Lois up to then?
Package for Peter Griffin.
Thank you, unknown delivery woman.
To get really brave and dramatic, Peter decides he's a woman now and will be getting gender reassignment surgery. Surely this will win them that Emmy after years of making jokes about this very topic. Peter goes to the bar to tell his friends about his decision, but Quagmire is shocked and doesn't understand why Peter's making such a drastic change.
I'll tell you why I'm doing all of this. For me. M-E. M-E.
M-E? Oh, clever. On the day of the surgery, Peter thinks they've generated enough emotion to finally win them that Emmy, but when he tries to leave, Dr. Hartman has other plans.
You want the Emmy, don't you? Yeah! And that is how I became your mother.
The Emmy committee calls Peter about the episode, and it turns out they hated it so much that they actually took back one of their Emmys. Realizing they keep getting beat in the comedy category, Peter thinks they should sneak their way into the drama category instead. They decide to go the route of Breaking Bad, with Peter standing half naked in the desert with a gun and a nearly dead body.
Why won't you die?
72 hours earlier, Peter was just a regular suburban father with a huge amount of house and hospital bills to pay. And if that wasn't enough, Peter also has cancer.
How long do I have to live?
1 week.
Desperate for more time and money, Peter turns to a life of selling drugs and killing any competitors that get in his way. Yet his secret slowly gets out as a crooked cop takes all his drug money in exchange for not turning him in. When Peter cries about it to Lois, she reveals she's willing to do whatever it takes to get their money back.
I'm helping you kill that cop. Because I'm darker than you and the audience ever thought.
Which brings us back to that whole naked in the desert part where Peter finally kills the dirty cop. With all their troubles out of the way, Peter and Lois embrace, and is that the bad guy from Game of Thrones? Prestige TV is too much for me, man. This doesn't do anything to win over the Emmy board either, so the family starts to lose hope, but Peter has one last idea up his sleeve.
We're gonna try for every single Emmy category, starting with Best Stunt Performance.
I don't think that's a category. So they try their hand at everything from Best Documentary to Best Reality Show, but nothing seems to stick. But then, out of the shadows, Peter is approached by TV host Bill Maher with some shocking news.
Family Guy will never, ever win an Emmy.
Bill alleges that there's a conspiracy against the show and urges Peter to look deeper. When Peter goes to the library to research this conspiracy, his shock is conveyed in a way only a bad old movie can show.
Oh man. Oh God. Oh man. Oh God.
Peter returns home a nervous wreck, ready to spill the beans on how deep this conspiracy goes, but it turns out the past Emmy winners are here to tell him why they can't win an Emmy.
Your show sucks.
Oh, it's that simple, huh? They essentially call out the show for its lazy parodies, racial jokes and practices, and just not being funny. But Peter learns to not care so much about awards, as the show has plenty of fans who write to him to say how much they love the show.
My favorite episode was when Homer stays home from church. Damn it, he thinks we're the Simpsons.
But what the Simpsons haven't done is show Santa Claus in the North Pole as a dark, sickening hell on Earth, as Family Guy did in Road to the North Pole. It's Christmas in Quahog, and Stewie is very excited to ask Santa for everything, from a ball to uranium. I remember my first Christmas nuclear weapon. After hours and hours of waiting in line, Stewie finally gets to the front, but the mall Santa decides to call it quits for the day.
Sorry, I'm done. You want your kid to sit on my lap? Meet me at the bar at Applebee's.
Feeling betrayed, Stewie decides to rope Brian into driving him to the North Pole so he can have a little talk with Santa Claus. A reasonable response if I've ever seen one. Brian tries to just take Stewie to a North Pole pop-up off the highway, but Stewie eventually sees through the charade.
Do you think I'm an idiot? Huh? Do you?
I mean, you were buying it for the first few minutes, my guy. Obviously, the last thing Brian wants to do is go all the way to the real North Pole, but Stewie is hell-bent on seeing Santa, though he wants to do a bit more than talk.
I'm going to kill Santa Claus.
All this could simply be averted if Brian just told Stewie the truth about Santa, but he can't bring himself to break the little guy's heart. Even though Brian doesn't want to go, Stewie finds his way by hitching a ride with a trucker. Unable to let him go alone, Brian follows behind in his car. They make it all the way to Maine until Stewie haphazardly shoots a flare gun inside the truck, causing them to barrel through cars, which sends Stewie flying through the windshield and Brian crashing into a snowbank.
What the hell happened?
Just some stupid stuff went down.
That's the understatement of the year. With Stewie determined to continue his journey, Brian finally tells him that Santa isn't real, though Stewie doesn't believe him. He proposes a deal. They go to the North Pole, and if Santa isn't there, Stewie will do a favor for Brian.
When Lois does that middle of the night feeding where she doesn't even open her eyes or really wake up, I'll let you take that one for me, Brian.
Brian, being the scumbag degenerate that he is, agrees, and the two commandeer a snowmobile until it runs out of gas. The two continue their journey on foot, and through snow and wind, they actually manage to reach the North Pole's gates.
I don't believe it. It's here.
Damn right it's here.
From Jesus to Santa, Brian does not have the best track record of believing in these things. The two enter the gate but find a depressing, smoke-billowing factory on the other side. When they knock on the front door, they're greeted by the actual Santa Claus, and when Stewie expresses his intention to kill him, his reaction is surprising to say the least.
Thank God.
What?
Do it. Please, put me out of my misery.
Santa explains he's been struggling to keep up with the growing population and the demand for newer, fancier toys from kids. Going from making wooden toys to iPhones cannot be easy. Additionally, inbreeding amongst the elves to meet demands has created an army of disfigured helpers.
It's a horror show up here. How could you let this happen?
Me? I didn't do this. Christmas did.
Through song, Santa explains how the demand of the holiday season is slowly killing all of them, causing them to cough up blood and faint. An elf doctor explains that if Santa goes out tonight, it could kill him, so Brian offers for him and Stewie to do his job. Loading up the sleigh with Santa's bloodthirsty reindeer, Stewie and Brian take off into the night to save Christmas. Their first stop goes less than ideal, as the two crash the sled and are forced to break in with a rock through the window. Who even has chimneys anymore anyway? The two are eventually caught by the homeowner, who mistakes them for burglars, but luckily Stewie knows just what to do.
What the hell did you do? He was gonna call the cops, man!
Things get even worse when they're forced to apprehend the mother and daughter, eventually realizing the presents they brought were for the wrong house. Whoopsie. The two escape, realizing that the job is too big and that the world needs to change to save Christmas. The next morning, the world is shocked to see that they have no presents under their trees. Brian appears on the news with a rough-looking Santa to explain that if everyone just asks for one present a year, they might be able to save Santa and Christmas.
One Christmas gift a year for each one of us. Can we live with that?
Surprisingly, the whole world seems to be in agreement, and by next Christmas, the North Pole has been transformed into a jolly, healthy workshop, with Santa looking like an absolute Christmas Chad. With him and the rest of the world seeming much happier, the message becomes clear. Be less selfish, or you will literally kill Santa. I'm okay with letting the Easter Bunny go, though. That guy gives me the creeps. But if you really want the creeps, look no further than when Brian went on a disturbing, hallucinogenic trip during a hurricane in Seahorse Seashell Party. With a raging storm blowing through Quahog, Brian decides this is the perfect opportunity to dip into his secret stash. Stewie catches him pulling something from the floorboard, so Brian fesses up.
These are mushrooms. It's a psychedelic bug. Makes you see weird things and feel happy for a few hours.
With nowhere to go because of the storm, Brian is interested in taking a little trip. Luckily, Stewie's pretty chill and won't tell anyone. We all could use a cool friend like Stewie.
Oh, dude, I think I can feel it too. I'm getting the context high.
While the storm continues to pour down, Lois is glad the family at least is getting time to spend with each other, but I'm not so sure Brian is even on the same planet anymore. Things get very weird as the family begins to morph and alter in strange, trippy ways. Just play it cool, Brian. Just walk out of the room like there's a stick up your butt. Stewie runs across Brian in the bathroom, and it's clear this trip is not going the way he hoped.
I'm gonna cut my ear off to prevent World War II. Oh God!
Oh, thanks for that lovely image, Family Guy. Stewie manages to sew Brian's ear back on while he continues to ramble incoherently.
Lesbians and deaf women wear the same clothes.
Yeah,
Yeah, they sure do, buddy.
Stewie vows to stay by Brian's side while he fights against his high, but damn, do those mushrooms have hands.
Do you like my soothing voice?
Terrified, Brian takes off running as the bathroom begins to shift and expand, eventually leading into a dark chasm that he falls into. He's fine, probably. Stewie does his best to comfort Brian in bed, surrounded by non-threatening stuffed animals. Except for that octopus back there, I don't like his vibe.
There, everything's gonna be fine. You're all right.
I think I'm dying.
He's not dying, but he might wish he were dead as his trip gets kicked into overdrive. Brian spirals into an absolute nightmare world filled with terrifying imagery and insane-looking monsters. Brian ends up splitting into tiny versions of himself that get gobbled up by a quaggoyle. Quagmire and gargoyle. I'm copywriting that. The earth opens up as Brian falls into hell itself, but just as everything goes white, there's an ear-piercing noise, followed by Stewie trying to get his attention. Brian finally wakes up from his trip thirsty as hell and looking like absolute crap. Once he gets a little water in his system, Brian rejoins the family who's in the middle of a heated argument.
Hey everyone. I'm sensing a lot of negativity here. What's going on?
Oh, you know, everyone in the family hates each other, the usual. Brian's trip doesn't last the entire episode, but it's so crazy that I just had to include it on this list. And to finish out the list, we have the time Peter and Lois got stuck in a series of cutaways in Cutaway Land. Peter and Lois are trying to have a little alone time, but they keep getting interrupted by the darndest things.
What the hell? What is that?
It sounds like a happy family dishwashing scene.
That's exactly what it is. Why is the kitchen in the living room? Shut up. The parents are frustrated they can't get any personal time, so frustrated that they both introduce the same cutaway.
You guys are more frustrating than trying to sell men's suits in Australia.
The universe must have not liked that because Peter and Lois begin to glitch out as they're being transported into the cutaway. Now in Australia, they discover they can hop around by setting up new cutaways.
This is weirder than an uptight guy at an Eagles concert.
They realize they're in some kind of cutaway land where they can move in and out of it by setting up the same cutaway, and they can move within cutaway land by setting up a cutaway individually. I am tired of saying cutaway already.
Peter, this may sound crazy, but this is our chance at the getaway we didn't have at the beach.
With no kids around and endless possibilities to choose from, Peter and Lois hop around to all sorts of romantic locations, like inside a locker, a funeral, and a cycling class.
Peter, where are you?
I'm a spin class bicycle seat.
Even with the ability to go anywhere in the world, their imaginations certainly seem limited, picking questionable destinations like the airport, a fart air balloon, and a pancake hospital.
The butter burns, so there's a crispy black circle around the circumference.
Son of a bitch!
While this has been fun, Lois is tired from hopping around and misses the kids, so she thinks it's time to leave.
Lois, our kids suck and cutaways are good. What's the problem?
First off, ouch. Lois insists they can't run from their family forever, but Peter is willing to give it a try.
Tom Brady's locker.
Peter, we've already...
Tom Brady's locker!
Lois finally convinces Peter that enough is enough and they both set up a cutaway to be with their kids again, but that just brings them into cutaway land.
I was just driving a car a second ago. That's a problem, right?
Peter and Lois continuously try to set up a cutaway to bring them home, but nothing seems to work. Hope they like Tom Brady's locker room because it looks like they're stuck there. Thankfully, there's a phone inside the locker room, so Peter decides to call Joe, but it sounds like he's a bit indisposed.
Joe is on a vacation far away. You called him up to talk it over.
After a very long voice message, he finally gets Joe on the line and explains their predicament. After surfing the web for answers, Joe finds that the only way for them to get home is to travel back to the very first cutaway gag. Who was in that cutaway again? Oh, right. Now all they have to do is kill him to return home, but surprisingly, this family of psychopaths has some hesitations about killing all of a sudden. Well, everyone except for Meg.
He cried like a bitch when I did it. Let's get out of here.
But it turns out Cutaway Land was all a dream brought on by some pad oysters at the beach. Remember, fever dreams always make the best dreams. Get food poisoning today. But before you do, make sure you hit subscribe so you can stay up to date on all our new videos like this one about some more of Family Guy's weirdest episodes.